Welcome to the latest episode of the Blazing Musket Podcast. We are joined this week by Donald Wine II from Stars and Stripes FC, which you can find on SB Nation. They cover both the men's and women's U.S. national teams, and we will be focusing on the U.S. men's national team for this week's episodes. He joins us to share his thoughts on everything going on with the team, as, of course, as we all know, the 2026 World Cup looms ever closer, as each day, each season goes by. So, Donald, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. I've just found out that you do 4 podcasts, which is amazing because I sometimes complain about doing just one podcast. So, how has your summer been? And as we head into the fall, where are you kind of at with the men's national team?
Yeah, well, first off, Thomas, thanks for having me on. I know we've kind of talked in the last couple of weeks about doing this, so I'm glad we were able to make this work. It's been a busy time this summer with soccer. I obviously you mentioned the 4 podcasts I do, but cover Formula One and college basketball, so those are kind of off and on and starting to ramp up for the fall. So it's been a very busy summer. I think maybe a little busier of a summer soccer wise than we all anticipated with the Gold Cup and the Club World Cup really dominating, but also just Major League Soccer, Leagues Cup, Open. There's just way too many cups going on right now. But now that we're entering, now that we're entering this fall portion, and Major League Soccer and NWSL kind of hit their crescendo. I think for the U.S. men's national team, this is an opportunity to figure out where they are, figure out who they have, and to start the improvement process that gets them basically up to full strength for the World Cup.
Yeah, because this is the thing. There seems to be a lot of talk since the roster came out about like what is the purpose of the fall? Like why are we bringing certain players in at this? Some people are saying, hey, okay, it's September, but we're really really close now. Like they feel like most of the roster should be like done and dusted at this point. Some people are more open to the fact that, hey, look, Pochettino is still kind of trying to figure this whole thing out. I mean, what are you, just before we get into all the particulars, but just generally, I mean, are you content with the roster that's come out, and what do you think they're trying to accomplish, in these next couple games?
Well, Mauricio Pochettino has basically indicated that this is his last window to evaluate players. He says he has he says he has a player pool right now of 60 to 65 players. I think that's way too many,
Yeah.
but I understand the fact that there should be, some leeway for some of these guys that are on the fringe to play their way onto the team. And I think it's one thing to have a lot of your guys in there to see how they gel and get them going and get them gelling together. That's one thing that we had in the last window, save for COVID, right? We were able to bring in our guys almost every single window and have them work together to become a cohesive unit. And that's what we kind of saw for the group stage of the last World Cup. This time around, we're still in that phase where we're trying to figure out what kind of team we're going to put out there, right? And I think Pochettino is rightfully taking the time to evaluate some players. I think a lot of us would like to see some more of the regulars in there. But having said that, knowing what he has said about some of those regulars and why they're not in this particular camp, I'm a little bit more at ease with it. And so we use this as an evaluation period for this one. And he's kind of said after that, now he's going to start narrowing it down because you got to start doing it at some point. And as you mentioned, we're very close. There's only 3, October, November, March, and then we're at the World Cup. Those are the windows that we have. You have a January camp where you can put some Major League Soccer players in there, but other than that, we got to start narrowing it down at some point.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is I think he might have mentioned, hey, look, somebody could get injured. Right? These guys aren't just all going to be, kind of frozen in ice from now until next June, and so things could happen there, and that makes sense. But like you said, I mean, when he threw that 60, 65 guys, I get that, but I don't know that. Do you think there's like maybe he would just be better off just maybe don't put that number out there because it just gives people something to, just gives people something to react to and go, oh, 65 is you know what I mean? Like, do you think like maybe like just keep that to yourself and say the pool is, it's still open.
Well, it's funny. I think, and someone's going to check me on the math, but I think there's someone in the neighborhood of 55 or so players that he has called in since he took over last October, right? So that's a lot of players that he has seen on the national team in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So for him to say 60 to 65, the number is like a culture, is like a sticker shock. But when you think about it, you're like, okay, that's not far from what we've seen so far. But I think the reason why people are up at arms about it is because we've seen some of these guys on the national team, and I'm sure all of us have our opinions about the ones that we don't want to see on the national team moving forward, especially for the World Cup. But like you said, there's going to be opportunities for these guys to show that they can be a part of this lineup as part of the 23 or 26, whatever it's going to be next summer. And I think on one hand, it's cool that he's giving these guys this opportunity, but I think a lot of us are in the boat of let's start narrowing it down now so that we can get the continuity together that we need. I don't want to sacrifice that for the World Cup. And right now, it feels like it's an either or choice because we're so close.
Yeah. No, no, that's a great point. I mean, you do have to. It's very challenging, right, to put together a team that only gets, that only comes together, here and there, and you can't, like you said, have a continuity. Jonathan Wilson used to always talk about. He always felt like teams that were able to call in a large core group of players from the same club, which in this situation, it's probably never going to happen with the U.S. But like he pointed to Spain, 8 or 9 guys are playing at 2 different clubs, like that type of stuff matters. But the U.S. Does the U.S. have, outside of MLS, do they have any guys that are expected to be there next summer that are playing together? Are they even going to see each other?
Well, the funny thing is we used to have that, right? We used to have, AC Milan, we used to have Musa and Musa and Pulisic. We had McKinney and Way at Juventus. A lot of these partnerships where there were multiple players on the team have broken up in the last year. But the other thing is, we found that it didn't really help in the national team because they kind of said they're walking into the situation playing differently than they do for their club. So it's that continuity, at least on the club level, can't really be translated, and that is a big issue. So I wonder if guys are like, hey, the continuity part of being on the same club doesn't really help me get on the national team. Me playing every day, me playing regularly and showing that I can play to the max of my ability, that's what's going to get me on. If I have to leave my buddy to do it, then let's do it. And we've seen a few of those this year. So it's interesting. You would think that you would have that, but I also think that, like in the case of Spain, right? I'm a Real Madrid fan. Half the team is Real Madrid, it feels like. The other half is Barcelona, and they hate each other for 300 days of the year. And then they get into camp, and all of a sudden, it's like they've been playing together since they were 3. So you have that. You can have that happen, but there's also the flip side of if you have too many guys on the same team. Sometimes, if that club is in the Club World Cup, for example, then man, you're really decimated here. So we kind of dodged some bullets by not having a ton of players on the same club, because what happens if that club has to do something else that precludes those players from being called in?
Yeah, absolutely. And now look, for local interest up here in New England, for Revs fans in particular, the only real chance that we see of getting anyone involved with the national team next summer is of course Matt Turner. But for these upcoming friendlies against South Korea and Japan, he's not called in. Jonathan Klinsmann was called in, and so how do you? I get that, like, is Turner kind of caught in between being, well, you were a guy in Europe when we were maybe starting to put this roster together, but very quickly, like you said, I think has gotten the picture here that I just have to play. Like, if I'm not getting regular minutes week in and week out, it's just not going to happen. So how do you feel about Turner not being called in this time? Who has been called in, and then and just kind of Klinsmann in particular?
Well, I think in the case of Matt Turner is my guy. He reminds me, his trajectory right now, currently reminds me of my guy, Bill Hamid, who was called into the national team. He was sitting on the bench at Michelin, and he looks really rusty. And he had one game where he didn't perform well, and they never called him really back in. And I think Matt Turner is going through a similar deal where the rustiness affected his play on the national team.
Hmm.
And now he's back with the Revs. And I think the first game, DC United, he pitches a shutout, which I know is easy to do against DC United, but he looked good in
He looked
doing it.
good. No, he did. He
And I
did.
think, yeah, and I think that's the idea here, right? And for a lot of the guys who've made moves, Paxton Aaronson's another example of this a little bit more recently. Uh, Pochettino basically said, I want those guys to get acclimated to their new clubs, wherever they may be. So I don't think that Turner not being called in means anything about Matt Turner's status with the national team. I think right now he's probably the number two, and he has to work back to get past Matt Freeze to be the number one. Now, great thing is there's going to be plenty of opportunities for him to do that directly in Major League Soccer, right? When they play each other, and you can kind of gauge, okay, they're in the same league. How are they each doing? But I think Matt Turner had a confidence problem. He had, and it was engineered by him bouncing from club to club only to sit. And now that he's in a place where he's playing regularly, obviously friendly confines because he left New England to go to Europe, I think that is going to be a really nice boost for him, and hopefully it's where he can rekindle some of that magic that he had in 2021, where he took his opportunity and turned it into being the starter for 50 games. So it's possible that guy has that kind of game left in him, and so I'm confident that him being with the Revs will help in his regard in the case for him being on the national team and being on that World Cup roster.
Yeah, I think the thing for Turner, this is probably gonna sound like a little bit of a criticism, but I think Turner is the type of, at least, look, I don't know him, but like he projects. I think he flourishes when he's kind of he's the man. He's a big deal, right? It's not great, like it's overused, but like a big fish in a small pond, kind of like. Because since he's come back, he threw out the first pitch at a Red Sox game. The Reds have had him all over social media. They've had him here. They've had him there. And he really seems to relish that. Or when he's come out for the warm-ups, the fort is chanting his name. He gets a big round of applause. Like, he really seems to be kind of feeding off of that. I mean, do you think that particularly in the goalkeeper position, is really, really critical, that you've got to really feel important, and give him the confidence to go and really kind of try and take back what I'm sure he thinks should still be his, which is the number one spot with the national team.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the goalkeeper is the one spot on the field where you are fighting to play, right? Like, you don't sub on goalkeepers normally in the 60th minute because of tactics or what have you, right? You sub it on because they're hurt or because they have pulled so many howlers in one game that you just need to, cut loose. And I think in the case of Turner, you have to have that swagger as a goalkeeper because, like you said, it's hard to get the number one job. It's even harder to keep it because there's always somebody who is pissed off because you have the number one spot.
Yeah.
And I'm sure now Matt Freeze has to learn how to deal with that, right, on the national team. If he's the presumed number one, he's got to look back and see all these other keepers, not just Roman, not just Jonathan Klisman, not just Matt, but Zach Steffen, Chris Brady, Gaga Slanina, like these guys who know they have to step up their game because they want to get on the national team and they want to play too. This is the one place where if you're the 26th man a year defender, you have a chance of playing in any game. It's just as long as Pochettino calls your number. If you are the third goalkeeper, there are two people that have to have something really bad happen to them for you to get into the game at a certain point. So that's where the confidence gets waned if you're not playing and when you're sitting. And I think that's what happened to Matt. That's what happens to a lot of goalkeepers when they sit, and that's where that's why I'm glad he actively sought and said, I don't care about staying in Europe, I care about playing. Let's go back to a place where I can play. And so with the Revs, I think that's going to help him boost his confidence, and he needs that swagger because any goalkeeper, I want goalkeepers to walk out like, you're not getting anything past me today. Like, I want him to have that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough job, and it's a lonely position. I remember, reading a book about goalkeepers, and it was kind of highlighted that, okay, you're out there with your teammates, but you're wearing a different jersey than they are, right? You have gloves on. No one else has gloves on. Like when the ball goes in the back of the net, whether it's your fault or not, the camera's coming to the goalkeeper, right? It's Yeah, I think it definitely takes something special to be a goalkeeper. Yeah, and I think, like you said, having that confidence to come out and say, yeah, you know what, like you do whatever you want tonight, but you're not getting anything past me, for sure. It's interesting to see how he deals with it. I think you're right though. He had to go somewhere where he knew he could play, and New England obviously was happy to welcome him back. What do you on a similar note? When Paxton Harrison comes back, there's some people, there's just people out there, I feel like, that they just look for any opportunity to, attack MLS and try and put it down. And, how can this, how can he be coming back? And some people compared it to, when Michael Bradley came back to Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, I felt that way when Michael Bradley came back, but that was a long time ago. MLS, to me, is a much stronger league now than when Michael Bradley came from Serie A back to TFC, and a lot of people felt like, you know what, like you were playing for Roma, like you were playing for a good Italian team. Surely you could have hung around at Parma or Palermo or somewhere else, or dropped into the championship, and you came all the way, came back home to Canada. But do you feel like, is it similar, Aronson coming back? Is it similar to Bradley, or is it a different situation?
They're all different situations. I think you kind of group Michael Bradley coming back and Clint Dempsey came back around the same time to Seattle. I think those are kind of their own separate boat. Those guys were not necessarily towards the tail end of their careers, but they're like, hey, we're at a point in our life where comfortability is going to be the key, and also playing every day, and also the fact that they're going to make more money than they've ever dreamed of. Cool, like
Yeah, yeah.
go do that. I think Paxton's a little different because he's so young, and I think I was surprised that he was going to come back to go to
Oh yeah.
Colorado, not because of anything other than the fact that I was like, oh, I thought he had a really good year last year for Utrecht. I thought Frankfurt really had him, really believed in him and thought that he was going to go places. And maybe they just behind the scenes said, hey, we want to loan you out again. He goes, I don't want to do that because I want to be more in control of my own destiny. This is a World Cup year. I'm trying to position myself to, backdoor onto this roster. And he's one of those guys that you would consider on the fringe. So he knows that playing regularly and playing within the eyes of Pochettino is going to do that. He will get that in Colorado. He may not get that in Belgium, right? Or some other place that they may send him to just because it's in Europe. Eyes don't stretch sometimes as far as people think. So I think that's part of the calculus of him coming back is, hey, I need to get in front of the coaches. The coaches are here in the United States. I need to be in front of these coaches as many times as I possibly can between now and next May when he starts naming the lineup or naming the roster. And I think that's I guess it's a very brave thing, but also I think you mentioned the MLS hate that people get or that they get because a guy decided to return home and they call him failure in Europe. I don't care about that, right? MLS is a really good league. It's not the EPL, but nobody's asking it to be. The EPL is not asking to be La Liga. La Liga is not asking to be Bundesliga, right? They're all different leagues. They all have their strengths. They all have their weaknesses. And MLS is no different. Also, MLS has the luxury of being just 30 years old, while those other leagues are 150 years old.
Yeah.
They have a little bit of longevity. And people think they are the best because they've listened. There is a group like me who remembers when there was no MLS, but there was a Premier League and there was a La Liga. So they have that longevity in the mind of everybody. And everyone thinks of Europe. I don't care deep down, everyone when they say Europe, they mean one of those big leagues. They don't mean Belgium, they don't mean the Netherlands, they don't mean second division Bulgaria, they don't mean Serie B. They mean the five big leagues that we all think of. Portugal is another example. We had so many guys in Portugal, and they couldn't get call-ups to save their life, and people were like, well, why aren't you calling up this guy? He's playing in Portugal. He's really good. You don't know that because you're not watching it. Like, it's not on TV. That you have to find a stream you have to find a stream of a guy at the game streaming it with their camcorder like we did in the movies. So my overall point is that MLS is good, and the reason why I know that is because CONCACAF is way better now than it was 10 years ago. because all of those countries are sending their players here to play in Major League Soccer to get better. Now, there should be a balance, but I also think that people need to recognize that we are not reinventing the wheel here. Every team, all 8 or 9 teams that have won the World Cup, have done so with a strong domestic league and with players from that league on the team. So we can't have a full European squad. We tried that with Berhalter, it didn't work. We can't have a full MLS squad either, right? You have to have the balance, but you have to just find where the best players are and how they play together. And if someone has to go to Europe to do it, that's great. If someone stays here and does it, terrific. One of the best players of all time, Landon Donovan. He spent most of his years here in Major League Soccer, and it did not stop him from becoming the best player that this country has produced.
Yeah, yeah, and and again, that was MLS. I don't know, 1.0 or 2.0.
1.0, yeah,
Yeah,
1.3.
yeah. My timeline is not.
I don't know what beta system they're on now.
Yeah,
So
yeah, but I think that the days of you can't just assume that if they're going to Europe, oh well, then it must be an improvement, right? Like you said, I mean, going to the Dutch league or like even like the Scottish Premier League. Okay, if you're not playing for Celtic and Rangers, and then Celtic and Rangers just kind of they just kind of take the piss out of everybody else anyway. So what's the difference? But for sure, I think that it's just that, like you said, Aronson's a young guy, and it's like, oh, it's that instant reaction. Oh, he's coming home with his tail between his legs, and he's failed. But instead, like, well, you maybe give him a little bit of credit for being smart enough to go somewhere and play, because a lot of these moves are. You might make a move to a club that really wants you to come in, but it's really the manager wanted you to come in. Now, if he's not there anymore, if he gets fired halfway through the season, he doesn't care about your World Cup prospects, right? It's like, look, like, I've got to turn this thing around, and if I don't turn this around by June, I don't have a job. So I don't really particularly care about, you getting called up to your net. You can just kind of get, you can get lost in the shuffle, very easily.
You bring up a great point, and a classic example of a coach kind of affecting some of these things, right? First of all, on one side, you have Juventus, where Wes McKennie has had to fight for his locker every single summer since he's gotten there, right? Different coaches, same coach, does not matter. They change his number. They don't give him a locker. He fights his way back into the team. He has a great season. Rinse, repeat, right? That cycle has continued this year. You also have Malik Tillman, who just moved to Bayer Leverkusen, and they just fired Eric Ten Hag after 2 games.
2 games, yeah.
So what's which again, like, that's one thing, right? But that is the risk you take, because in Europe they will fire you after 2 games, and what are you left with?
Yeah.
A guy's gonna come in and they could be like, I don't like this Tillman guy. Now he's here until at least January. I'm just gonna pluck him on the bench, and he's not gonna play because he's not the type of player that I go for. And now he's stuck, right? Because a coach. Because he went for a coach and he got fired. It happens in basketball all the time too. We talk about it in college basketball all the time with the transfer portal of guys following coaches everywhere because they know that coach believes in them. And you can't really do that in soccer all the time because there's way too much money involved.
Yeah.
So those are the risks that you take. And again, sometimes it's about the league. It's about the team. And I think in Paxton's case, the fact that Zach Steffen there is a big boost because he knows they're coming by to see him every week, right? So as long as they're there, why don't you come see me too? That might be part of the calculus, but I obviously don't know that. But I think that is if it is part of the calculus, it's a strong move.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I asked, any of these guys now that think they're in a good situation, it's like, okay, but if that changes, January is a long time away, and I think Pochettino's been pretty clear. Like, you need to be playing. Like, if you want to get called in, you need to be getting games on a regular basis. And I mean, he knows, right? Like, he obviously gets some criticism because you've never coached a national team before. Okay, fair enough, that is true, right? But he played for his national team on a fairly regular basis while playing, while playing in Europe. So he knows, like, hey, look, like, you can't just assume you're just going to get called in. Because of who you are, what you've done in the past. If you can't get a game, so these immediate games. So speaking of Weston McKennie, right? So Weston McKennie wasn't called up. Is there anyone else that you were surprised not to see. And I know Pochettino did a pretty good job of kind of explaining why some of these guys aren't here. Was there anyone that, no real explanation and they're just not there, and you're kind of scratching your head wondering why he's not in?
I don't think so. I think maybe the closest, and it's maybe more of a personal. I think we need to see him again to see how he does. Is Joe Scally? The reason why I say that is because Anthony Robinson is being held out once again because of rest. He had the offseason knee surgery, and has been playing decently. Playing decently well for Fulham in the first few games, but we need to know what that depth looks like. That's where we were killed in the last World Cup. That's where we're killed in most World Cups. Is we don't have the depth of some countries. Our top lineup that everyone thinks of is really strong and can go up against anybody. And if you play them together, I'm not betting against them, but the depth is a problem in certain areas, and one of them being the wingbacks or the fullbacks. So what happens if we don't have Serginho Dest? What happens if we don't have Anthony Robinson? We don't want to be left with, oh, well, we'll just kind of plug this guy in and see if it works. That's where I think a Joe Scally would have helped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, South Korea, Japan, there's nothing to play for, right? They're qualified. So, what do you? I'm sure you get up for these games, because of the work that you do, but as a fan, you're going to watch, you're going to tune in. So, like, what are you looking for, right? I feel like it's kind of one of these traps where if they don't play great, it's like, well, it's just a friendly. And if they come out and they have a fantastic performance, it's like, well, it's just a friendly. So what? Well, a little bit deeper than just whatever the score says at the end of the game. Like, what are you really kind of trying to key in to, for these these two games in particular against South Korea and Japan?
Well, I mean, the first thing overall is you want to see progress, and we go back to those to the March window during Nations League where we bombed out, and then we had those friendlies in June right before the Gold Cup, bombed out. And then we had a pretty decent showing during the Gold Cup, right? We got to the final, which is where we're supposed to be, and we lost to a Mexico team that was on paper better than us, and we had the lead for a while, and we, maybe could have won that, but I'm fine with that showing. Now we need to build upon that showing and build upon that, and I think, speaking to Tim Ream today, he kind of talks about like, hey, you don't know when your last drill will be for the national team, when your last practice will be, when your last game will be, when your last corner kick will be. So play as if that is your last one, so that if that's the last tape you're left with, they look at it and go, hey, that guy was good. Like we need to call him back in. And so I think these guys, I want to see the fire. I want to see the grit that needs to be rebuilt. I want to see progress on that front. And also I just want to see a little more cohesion. And that's obviously going to, take a little bit of time, but that journey needs to start now. It should have started a year ago, but it really needs to start right now. And I think these guys, I think the good thing is these guys know that, and we have some players on this team that I believe are cognizant of that and recognize that they need to be the drivers behind it. But it takes everybody to be a part of it. Again, if you're that third string goalkeeper, what are you doing to help the starter in that game? What are you doing to help him succeed? If you're the guy that's last off the bench and you're a right wing, what are you doing to help Tim Weah? What are you doing to help Diego Luna? Right? Like, those are things that we all can do. I come from a thing. In basketball in high school, I was the last person, so my job was to make sure everybody else was ready, knowing that I wasn't going to play. That is a mentality that you have to take on yourself and understand that there's going to be days where you're not going to want to do that, but that's your job. If everybody continues to do their job, we'll make that progress.
Yeah, because I think Pochettino, when I have the misfortune of being a Tottenham fan. When he coached the team, he talked about that, where he felt like to him that the player's job was to be fit and available, train all week, and then if you get picked, you get picked. If you don't, you don't. But to him, it's like that's not really your job. Your job is to be prepared and to put in the work during the week, so that if I do select you to play, that's kind of like a bonus. But your job really is day in and day out. You need to show up and be fit. You need to be ready. You need to be prepared. So I think that's a pretty easy mentality to bring into, hey, look, if you want to look at this as a friendly, no problem, but I'm going to remember who looks at this as a friendly and who looks at this as an opportunity, because, he said himself, and like you said, the door to let more guys come into the pool is going to close. Is there anyone that do you think has a big opportunity here in these two games, or maybe it's their last chance, like someone that could help the team next year, but they've got to find a way to show that for these two games?
I think the two that come to mind, and they're probably the two that a lot of people were kind of like, wait, we're bringing these guys back in after the summer, is Max Arston and Alex Freeman. Now, did I think they showed some flashes where I'm like, okay, they can be useful, especially in that depth conversation we had? Yeah, absolutely. But to start, right, and those guys were the main starters at fullback for the majority of the Gold Cup. That level needs to be ratcheted up a bit. Hopefully they take what they learned from this summer and understand that when they get to the national team camp, this is a different beast. This is not, DC United. Guys, I can make fun of my own team. We're not going down there to whack some 3-0 and come home. This team is ready to end our careers. That's what they're trying to do, and they're trying to embarrass us on our own turf. And I think, as you mentioned, the preparedness that Pochettino wants. My mantra in life is stay ready so you ain't got to get ready and you always be ready. That's what these guys need to do. They need to embrace this moment, this opportunity that they have in South Korea and Japan. These are two teams we could easily see in a group stage. These are two teams we could easily see in a quarterfinal of a World Cup. And so these guys need to approach it as such. Stay ready, because if their number's called, you want Pochettino to look back at that game film and go, man, this guy, I wasn't even thinking of calling him in, but I'm glad I did. And that is the lasting memory that you have. And I think for these players also, just really, excite and energize the fan base, re-energize, I should say, because some people are kind of, meh on this team. And they're like, this team's not really going to do much, so why do they want me to dial in? Give them a reason to dial in. Give them a reason to tune in for these friendlies. Give them a reason for next month when they, again have two more, that people go, oh, well, they look good last month. I can't wait for these games, Ecuador and Australia. I can't wait for those. That's what they need to do. And they may not be thinking as far ahead as that, but that's part of the calculus. They have an extra responsibility this time around because they are hosting the World Cup. They are the team that when they walk out, the eyes of 350 million people are going to be on them. Some of them for the very first time. Do they want that time to be where they're like, oh, it's just every another game, or do they want to embrace that moment and, again, as you mentioned, be prepared and stay ready? That's the question, and that's kind of the mentality that some of these guys have, but we need 26 guys to have that.
Yeah, I think the appreciation for what this is. I mean, I feel like it should kind of be there. Like, it's a World Cup. So first of all, for now anyway, until Infantino has his, God knows what he's going to do with the World Cup. But for now, it's only once every 4 years. It's in America. It's in the U.S., Canada, Mexico. Hasn't been here since 1994. Like this as a player, some people are going to be seeing their second World Cup in the United States. No one's going to be playing, right? So this opportunity will never come again for any of these players, right? Most likely, there's no chance. You get one chance in your life to play in a World Cup in your home country, and it's never going to happen again. So the criticism around the team, it's tough. It's tough to kind of dig into. Well, what does that mean? The lack of passion, the lack of effort, that sort of thing. That gets used kind of a lot. But I mean, do you think that what they've done this year, it seems very up and down. Like you said, the Nations League, that was pretty bad, right? The friendlies weren't great, but then they make a run to the Gold Cup final. But then again, it's, like you said, well, that's the expectation. The expectation is to get to the final. So, like, on the whole, you know, how do you look at 2025? You know, so far, you know, is it did it come in below your expectations? Did it meet? You know, it's kind of tough for me to sit there and say they've had a good year, they've had a bad year. I mean, it was, you know, just how do you feel about it taken as a whole?
I think so far in the whole, you have to consider it a down year. And I think the disappointment is, like I said, we should be here talking about, oh my goodness, like this team looks good. We're about to play some tough games against Japan and South Korea. The World Cup is around. Man, I cannot wait to see this team. Right? We were kind of thinking that in 2022. We're like, man, I cannot wait to get these guys on the field
Yeah.
at the World Cup because who knows? Like, oh, England, Pfft, England, okay, Wales, nothing. Right? We're talking in those terms, and now people are like, man, I hope we don't get grouped. And you should never have that kind of emotion running through your fan base 9 months before a World Cup. You just shouldn't, even if you haven't qualified yet. And the fact that we've already qualified as being host, and we've had this time to prepare, and it feels like we're behind the eight ball as a program. I think that's disappointing, and so that's why I say they need to rekindle that passion that the fans have. They need to, you know, fans need to really figure out why they put in all the time, why we do all the traveling, why we watch the games, like those sort of things. They need to give us a reason to tune back in again and get motivated. But also, we're the beacons for everybody else because, as I'm sure you've had, everyone's coming to me saying, "Yo, D, tell me about the World Cup. Tell me this. Tell me that." And if I can't tell them something positive, they're like, "So, like, why is it here?" They the
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
who the people who are going to these games, who are traveling for these friendlies that some people think are unimportant, but they are, they're the ones that are going to be the sounding boards for the team. They're the first line of defense. The first people that your friends are not going to Pochettino and say, "Tell me about the national team." They're coming to you. So what are you going to tell them? Are you going to tell them, "Man, I went to Jersey and I had a great time. They won. They looked great," or am I going to say, "This game was awful and this team is terrible"? You don't want that question to have to be discussed and debated. So that's where they need to really find a way to rekindle the fire within everyone, right? Within the team, within the players, within the coaches, within the fans. Everyone has to rekindle that because we need to be united as a program, as a country behind this team when they walk out in June of next year. You can't do that if they're kind of, meandering their way through this process. They need to attack it because there's only, as you mentioned, there's only one chance for these guys to make a World Cup roster at home. That, like, if 2038, most of these, if we get in 2038 or 2042, these guys are going to be long gone from the
Yeah.
national team,
Yeah.
and they're gonna wish that they were a part of it. They're going to lament the fact that, oh, I didn't take advantage of this opportunity. If I could play half as decent as them, do you know how hard I would be? I would be probably putting X-Lax in people's drinks to get on the national team. That's like not necessarily poison their food, not anything bad, but like I would do anything to get on the national team. That's how I feel, and I would wish that some players on the team would be as gung ho as I would be if I was in their position. I think that's where a lot of people lose the passion because they say they don't have the fire that I feel like that we should have, and yes, that's a subjective thing, but I'm old school, right? That's the guys that we grew up with were guys that, I mean, Brian McBride was bleeding in that Italy game, and he was like, "Don't take me off, like just patch me up." Diego Luna, when he did that in January, that was the best moment for this team so far this year because that ignited a bunch of people who say, "Yeah, bring that back, bring that passion back."
Yeah. I where do, now I. It is kind of fun because I just feel like it kind of happened quickly, like all of a sudden, like you said, the momentum from 2022, or just this young, like this is the most talented, you know, group of players that the U.S. has ever had. Not just the guys that are playing for the national team, but like even just all the way down to like USL League One. Like the talent level has come way up in the last, for sure 10 years and even just like the last 5 years. But when do you think the feeling around this team started to turn, because I thought when Pochettino got hired, it was like, okay, well, look, everyone's gonna back this guy to the hilt, and whatever he says, everyone, okay, hey, what do we know, right? Like, this is what we wanted. We wanted, we don't want, Berhalter, a lot of people didn't really want him to come back for a second time around and that whole thing. And, we don't want you just go and pick the best, just don't get Jim Kurtner, the best guy from MLS who's available. We want this big time guy to come here and tell us this is what you got to do. And now they've got that. And now some people say, well, we don't really, maybe he's telling us a little bit too much what to do. Like, when do you think this all kind of turned? Because I thought for sure when Pochettino got hired, it's like, all right, that's it. People are just they're going to back him all the way, they're going to back him, back the team, and all the way through until the end of the World Cup.
I think it was in the performances. I mean, initially he gets hired. They wait like a month or so, and he comes in October, and then they lose in Mexico, and they lost to Mexico for the first time in 5 years, right? Like that is almost like, oh well, we could have just kept Berhalter for that, right? In fact, we could, Berhalter, would have won that game, and so the idea that, first of all, I think the Berhalter situation, I really admire and appreciate Berhalter for what he did for the national team. And I think a lot of people don't give him the credit that he deserves. I think at certain points, people just did not want him and they wanted him gone. And they didn't care about how the results were or how things were. They just knew that it was his fault. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I said during, some of those struggles under Berhalter was, guys, it's okay to say that the players had a terrible day. Like, they're good players. They're great players. Great players have bad days, right? The best player that Barry Sanders had days where he had negative yards. He's my favorite player of all time. Best player, best athlete to lace up cleats. But there are days where he had bad days, and he would correct himself and hold himself accountable, and we would do the same as fans. And he'd come back and have something that we were like, don't worry about it last week. That's fine. So, but every single time the players won, it was the players won in spite of Berhalter.
Sure. If
the team lost, Berhalter was the reason, and it wasn't the players. And I think maybe for the first time when Pochettino got hired, and we go, okay, we're spending $6 million on this guy. He's coming in. He's got that pedigree. Everyone knows who he is. And then they lost. People go, okay, maybe it was the players. Maybe the players did, maybe they can't have a bad day. And I think they're recognizing that sometimes these players had more bad days than we would think. And again, that's part of the process, but it's about holding everyone accountable for that and not just one person. So I think maybe that's where it turned, but I think it turned a long time ago. I think the Berhalter hate is what turned everything and soured everything in Copa America. The grouping leading to all these changes maybe made people felt like we wasted a cycle, because if we had hired somebody with the name brand pedigree back in 2023, then okay, we're in the middle of a cycle and maybe none of this happens or we go down a different path. But I don't have a DeLorean. I don't think you do. So we can't go back with Doc and see what would happen if we had hired Poch in 2023 or hired somebody else. So we have to go with what we have. But I think now it's about, we don't want to waste any more time. We've wasted all this time in some aspects. So let's not waste any more. And I think the longer we do, that's when people can, rightfully get more impatient.
Yeah, it's complicated for sure, because I do feel like listening to a lot of this stuff kind of from afar, it did seem like it just Berhalter, just there's nothing he could do right. It was just automatic, nope, wrong, nope, bad lineup, bad for nope, bad, all horrible. It doesn't. It's just there's just no coming back. Now I say that as someone who, that's where I'm at with Caleb Porter. There's just no coming back for this guy. Like, just please, God, be gone.
There's probably a couple of clubs in Major League Soccer who some would agree with you, right? In Portland and Columbus, they may have that same type of feeling. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I every time I talk to Columbus fans, they're like, yeah. So how you they have empathy. I will give them credit for that. They have empathy for us and Caleb, but they don't miss him. So, but yeah. So and the other thing too that I don't. it's not anyone's job, right? Like, it's not anyone's job to sell the national team, right? Like, what you do, you're not going to come out and just be a cheerleader just because, right? But there's been a lot of stuff from former players, like just drama, I guess is the best way to put it. Drama between former players that are on a podcast or multiple podcasts, and then current players that are doing like documentaries and have their own like marketing teams, and like it's not their job to get somebody like me to be really interested in the U.S. men's team for the World Cup. Like, I get that. But when I see these things, I see this kind of like drama playing out on social media and these like dueling marketing teams or whatever, it's just like, it's really tough to get excited for this team when, Landon Donovan and Tim Howard are calling guys out, and then, and then some guys' parents are calling out it's just, I mean, how you're in this, right? You're creating content based around the national team, but you're not caught up in this drama, but you understand that you do have to put stuff out that people listen to, otherwise, why am I doing this? But how have you felt about seeing all this stuff play out, and do you hope it ends, and how? Like, how does this kind of play itself out?
There's a lot of loaded questions in there, and it's not your fault because this whole situation is loaded, right? And I think first off, you go back to the roster for the Gold Cup and the friendlies, and Christian Pulisic asking for the summer off to rest and opting out of the Gold Cup, and he would tell you that he wanted to come back for the friendlies, and Pochettino said no. Pochettino said that he opted out of everything. Who knows? As they say, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of that. But it did not help that Christian was going on, his documentary to do it, that his dad was saying stuff and trying to defend the fact that he said he wants rest. And okay, that's great. He's had a long season, but I think this is just for me. I think the issue lied in the fact that he said that as if he was the only player on planet Earth that needs rest. Every other guy on the national team has had long seasons. They've come back from injuries. They've battled, multiple games, and he has not played. And I think a misconception is that there are more tournaments that were 30 years ago than there are now. There are more international windows 30 years ago than there are now. How many we've knocked out at least 2 windows, and after the World Cup next year, we're going to get rid of another one on the men's side, because the clubs have basically said these players are being overworked. They're the ones that are overworking them, and the international team really isn't. So when someone's like, oh, he's played like 50 games this year, I'm like, yeah, everyone did. Everyone played 50 games. If you're in the U.S. Open Cup, you played 45 games. So everyone is in the same boat, and I get that his work, and he's on a team with Yunus Musa, who took off on a personal level. And honestly, he could have just said that. If he said, hey, I have some personal things I got to deal with, if you allow me the time to do that, I feel like I'll be refreshed and ready to work myself back to a point where you can call me in. And I don't think everyone said, hey, take care of what you got to do. Have a great summer. You had some of the guys who were injured. Serginho Dest came in and literally fought to try and be on the team, and they're like, dude, just go home and rest.
Yeah.
Appreciate your effort. Go home. Like, they did that, right? That Tim Weah and Wes McKinney were on the Club World Cup, so they couldn't get called in. And so you have this situation where you had guys who, again, had long seasons, and they opted to come in. And I think it was maybe an air of entitlement in saying, oh, I need this rest, so I should be able to have it. And I get that everyone needs rest, but he knows he's at a point where he is supposed to be Captain America, right? He's supposed to be the guy. And for him to say, I need rest, told people that the Gold Cup wasn't worth it, and that being on a team with some of these guys that were on that team wasn't worth it. And I think that's the wrong approach to it. And I think that's where rightfully some of these older heads came in and said, yo, that's not something we would do. Now, I will say for Landon, and I love Landon. He was on my show. I've played soccer with him. I love him to death. He's my second favorite, second best player on the team, right? I think it it was a disservice coming from him because he took that sabbatical. Right message, maybe the wrong messenger. And I think that's where it blew up a little bit as well. So it created this division. And again, you have these, I think the old heads probably get tired of all these people on the internet saying, oh, well, like Christian Pulisic plays way more games than they did back in the day, knowing that's not true. Like knowing that these guys could not take a window off. They could not take a game off. They played those first round league cups in whatever country they were playing in because it wasn't always England. They're playing, on cotton, cotton cart path fields that were put together with duct tape, playing at the Saprissa, which is really just concrete with painted green. Like they're playing in those type of atmospheres and those type of environments, and they could not say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I need a rest." Now we have changed as a society where we recognize mental health and all that stuff is important, and we need to take those breaks. But I also think that he presented it. Christian Pulisic presented it as if he was the only one who dare need a rest because he was so much more tired than everybody else, and that just wasn't true. And I think that created some division. And now, do I think they've hashed it out since then? Absolutely. I don't think it helped that his dad came out in the documentary like 2 weeks ago and kind of threw everything back onto the fire. But I think in the national team locker room, on the team now, I think a lot of those guys have said, "You're here, so let's effing play." Like this is how you win everybody back. This is how you say the rest was worth it. You come back and you play and you play your butt off, and if you score a goal, everything's going to be okay again. Everyone's going to love you again. And so but at the same time, these guys cannot take being on the national team for granted. If there's a roster or a player pool of 65 guys, then 64 guys need to understand that they can be replaced at any moment. Christian Pulisic is one of them. Like, just because Christian Pulisic is who he is does not mean that Pochettino won't drop him. And I think that is where, and we see, some of these guys were like, oh, that guy's not called in, and he gives some explanation. But initially you're like, huh, interesting. All of these guys play, or at least take their measures from the fact that they don't think that there's somebody behind them trying to bang down their door to get on the team in their place. And for a while, that's how it's been presented. These guys have been basically called in, for the better part of 3 years. Yeah, automatically almost. And I think, the first wrinkle was Matt Turner, unfortunately, right? Matt Turner doesn't get called in. That should have been the shot across the bow that, hey, I don't care who you are. Like, he was the number one guy, and now he's not on the team right now, and he has to work his way back onto the team. So these guys have to understand that, and I think Tim Ream said that today. He said, look, these guys have to understand that every single play you play as if this could be your last, and you don't want that to be the reason why the coaching staff goes, I think we're good somewhere else. So that's where the division, I think, kind of built up. But I hope it's died down now, and we can focus on this team coming together, whoever those 26 end up being.
Yeah, I think the first point you made there was, if Pochettino said, okay, well, I'm only going to call in guys that have played less than 50 games in the last year and are feeling pretty good and nothing's bothering them, it's like, well, then they would have had to forfeit their position. I mean, you can't play.
Hey, I'm ready, coach.
Yeah,
I'm ready to play. I've played 0 games.
I don't know why I hadn't really thought of it that he felt like, hey, people know who I can say I need a break, but there's a lot of other guys that can't say that they need a break, but they probably need one just as much as he did. Yeah, it's just it's complicated. That's the thing. That's why I don't like to see it kind of just get reduced down to people taking shots at each other, and like you said, Donovan himself took a sabbatical, so maybe that would have been an opportunity for him to come out and say, hey, look, I don't really know Christian's full deal here, but I've been there. I've been in those moments. Or maybe they could have come out and said, hey, you know what? There probably were summers where I wish I could have said, hey, yeah, I'm falling apart here. I need some time off.
Well, I think also because of his leadership role, right? He's held the captain's armband longer than anybody on the team, or on the team at least right now. And I think for him, what also did a disservice to his statement that he's tired is that he's, on Instagram everywhere but watching soccer.
Yeah.
It felt like he was on the
Yeah.
boat, he was fishing, he was playing tennis, he's playing golf, and he's hanging with his family at a family vacation. Which again, cool, but like it would. I think it would have meant something if he said like, "Hey, I really feel like I'm gonna be doing the team a disservice by playing because I'm that tired." But I would love to be in camp. I would love to continue to be at the practices. I would love to help the younger guys along and kind of be like an extension of the coaching staff if you will have me. And if he didn't have that, like, showing him in the stands at the game or in the press box or in the booth or whatever at a game, watching the team and being like, "Hey, I know I'm not playing, but I'm locked in. I still want to be a part of this, and these guys mean something to me, and I want to be there." I'm saying a lot of things that a lot of people could ask questions like, "Oh, you don't think this?" I do think he cares about his teammates, but I think again, as the captain, as one of the captains, as one of the leaders of this team, he has a higher responsibility. And by again, going on the podcast and the documentary, and then like going to play golf while the guys are playing soccer and getting crushed by Switzerland, that was a lot where a lot of people said, "Hey, he doesn't care about this tournament, or he just doesn't. He thinks that he can just walk back into this team and they're going to accept him." The coaching staff, I should say. And I think that's where, again, as a captain, this is what I would do. And I'm saying that maybe he could have considered some of those things. Maybe Pochettino said, "No, I don't want you here at all." That's a question for Poch. But I think again, there's ways he could have gone about it that would have made people feel like he was still emotionally invested in what they were doing, but needed the rest.
Yeah, I don't think being all over Instagram all summer really helps. You're out there living it up while you just need a physical and emotional break from the day. It's like, okay, then maybe be a little bit smarter and make your post for the day. You're sitting at home reading a book.
I'm in a cabin. Yeah, I'm in a cabin in the
woods.
woods.
You're in a hammock. Yeah,
just
not
chilling.
Golfing, right? I mean, golfing is a strenuous sport. I mean, it's a thing. I just think there was maybe little opportunities here. It's like, look, just if you're trying to be on the down low,
just play it cool.
Be on the down low, right?
Mm-hmm.
I say this to someone that I don't have a social media team and I'm not on Instagram, but
But he does, so
but
he
should
does,
use right. Shifting strategy.
Did they get a break
guys.
too?
Yeah.
Right. So let's think of this, and the fact that we are talking about this and we don't have social media teams behind us means that somebody missed that memo. Like, hey, how do we make this where he can take a break and still be on the up and up?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Last question. We don't know. We know the U.S. is going to be there at the World Cup. We don't know who they're going to face in the group. If you could pick the group, if you could pick the the groups, what are they? Are they 4-team group? What are they? What's the?
They're 14 groups, 12, 14 groups.
12, 14 groups. Okay. Mm-hmm. You can pick the 3 other teams that the U.S. plays in the group stage, but you have to balance it. You've got to give them a really challenging game, a winnable game, and a 50-50 game. But you get to pick the 3 opponents that you'd like to see them play in the group stage. Who would you really like to see them have an opportunity to go up against next summer?
That's a great question. It's hard to do because of the fact that there's going to be 16 more teams in this thing. So you have your Uzbekistan's, right, who we played, and everybody back then was like, "Why are we playing Uzbekistan?" Hey, they just qualified for the World Cup, so throw them in there because throw them in there because I seen them. So there's your team from Asia. I would say give me an Ecuador. I think again we'll see them next month. That'd be an interesting matchup, but someone from South America that's not Argentina or Brazil, I think would give us a good test. And then okay, we have to probably put somebody from Europe in there because they're a third of the field. So give me, give me Denmark. And of course they haven't qualified yet, but I think Denmark is that sneakily good team that can take out anybody. but is also beatable and again a big enough name that you would do it. Look, I'll say it. I hope we get some home cooking in this World Cup. I hope they, I hope the ping pong balls feed us a group that's manageable because I want to see us do well. I don't want to see us line up against Argentina, France and Germany and have to deal with that every single game. I kind of want to space out the heartburn a little bit. So that's how I'd put it.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's interesting, right? You want to get out of the group, right? But you want to be challenged and have some, because I think that's a lot of people's concern is with 48 teams. Like obviously you're there's a lot, like there's plenty of good teams across the world, but like you're kind of diluting it a little bit more where maybe some of these you can always kind of count on a really tough first round opponent. Maybe not as much, with 48 teams coming in, but yeah, for sure that'll be really interesting to see kind of how that all plays out. So as first of all, again, we really appreciate we're going on just over an hour here. We really appreciate the time. People want to follow along with this team. How can they do that with you coming along with them?
Yeah, so first of all, follow our coverage at Stars and Stripes FC. It's SB Nation's site, and we'll be doing as much coverage as we possibly can, not just at the World Cup, but before that, because it's important to tell those stories beforehand. Also, you can find me at Blazing DW. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. I'm also on the Bird app. At least I have one. And then my podcast, I guess I'll plug both of them. USA Soccer Cast, which focuses on the U.S. national teams and Major League Soccer and all the players and where they play. And World of CONCACAF, which focuses on the entire region. I think it's very important that people not shun away from the fact that CONCACAF has gotten better and we have to get better as a result. And we learned about each of the 41 member nation teams on that podcast. So I think we've done laser focuses on, I believe, 30 of them so far. So we're down to our final 10. So can tune in, and we also discuss everything in CONCACAF as well, from World Cup qualifying to Nations League and even some of the domestic cups. So follow us there.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll definitely we'll put that all in the show notes, and hopefully people check those out and follow you and head over to the Stars and Stripes as well. I have one. Could you? I personally am a motorsport fan. We have a small crossover group here as well that listens to this show, that listens to Revolution Recap, that is also into motorsports and F1. What is the F1 podcast, and is there a driver or team that you support openly, or do you just are you just more of a general F1 fan?
Yeah, so the podcast, first of all, is called DRSFC. It is an F1 podcast by soccer nerds. We are six soccer fans that are kind of like you, soccer fans who also watch F1. And we started with that premise in mind. We obviously bring some soccer lingo into the podcast. My guy is Lewis Hamilton. He is him and Senna. I was wearing a Senna shirt earlier, but like him and Senna are the two greatest drivers that I've ever seen. And so being able to watch him is awesome. I guess I'm Ferrari by default, but next year Cadillac is coming. Audi is coming. Those are going to be one of those two teams are going to win me over. I grew up as part of a GM family, and currently, Audi's the local team here because Audi's headquarters are here. So I'm really excited about both of those and what they can do, and having 11 teams on the grid for the first time in a while.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome. Hopefully, you think the Ferraris are going to be able to get themselves together and get a win at Monza? That's kind of their thing.
That's their thing, and it's also like it feels like with McLaren and how great they're doing. It's kind of all that's left, right? They're not going to get the drivers, they're not going to get constructors, so just throw everything at Monza and win at Monza. Just win, baby.
All right, well, Donald, again, we really, really appreciate you coming on, and we'll be sure to have you on again as the World Cup inevitably gets closer and closer.
Yeah, Thomas, thanks a lot, man, for having me, and we'll do it again soon. It's been a lot of fun.